Maya Calloway had one rule she lived by: stay invisible. It was not a rule she chose out of shyness. It was a rule she learned the hard way, the way most people learn the things that stick with them forever. When you are half human in a world built for pure-blooded wolves, you learn quickly that being seen is not always a gift. Sometimes it is a target. She had been working the Crescent Peak Gala for 3 days straight, with almost no sleep. Her job was simple: make sure the goblets were full, the candles stayed lit, and the guests had no reason to notice the girl carrying the trays. She was good at her job. She had been invisible for 24 years. One night in a grand ballroom full of wolves was nothing she could not handle. The hall was enormous, lit by hundreds of candles that threw warm gold light across stone walls carved with wolves mid-run. The ceiling was painted dark blue, scattered with silver stars. Every corner of the room held someone important: pack elders in long coats, noble families with old names, rival alphas who smiled at each other with their mouths and watched each other with cold eyes. It was the night of the blood moon, the most sacred night in pack tradition, and everyone in the room knew what it meant. Tonight, Alpha King Dorian Ashvale would stand before every pack and make it clear, once again, that the kingdom was his. Maya did not know what Dorian Ashvale looked like. She had never needed to. She had her tray, she had her route, and she had her goal: get through the night without breaking anything or drawing attention. She was crossing the center of the ballroom when it happened. A large man stumbled into her from behind. He had clearly had too much to drink and too little sense, and when his shoulder hit hers, the world tilted. The tray wobbled. Maya spun, throwing her arm out to catch her balance, and her open palm connected hard with the side of someone's face. The crack of it cut through the music like a blade. The music stopped. Every single person in that ballroom went silent. Maya stood there, hand still raised, heart completely still inside her chest, and she looked up. The man she had hit was tall, very tall. He wore no crown, but he did not need one. There was something about him that made the air around him feel heavier, like standing near the edge of something vast and deep. His hair was dark, his jaw was sharp, and his eyes, when they turned to her, were silver. Not gray. Silver, like moonlight trapped behind glass. There was a red mark on his cheek where her palm had landed. The goblets hit the floor and shattered. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. A guard to her left had already taken one step forward, and 2 more were coming from the right. An elder near the wall had gone pale. A woman nearby pressed her hand to her mouth. Maya knew, in that moment, with complete and total certainty, that she was about to be removed from the room in a way that had nothing to do with kindness. The man she had hit raised one hand. The guard stopped. He looked at her. She looked at him. The silence between them was so complete that she could hear the candles flickering. He touched his cheek, not in pain but in something closer to surprise, the way a person touches a place where they felt something unexpected. His silver eyes moved over her face slowly, like he was reading something written there that he had not expected to find. And then, deep in his chest, something shifted. It was not a growl. It was not the sharp, territorial sound that wolves made when they were threatened or insulted. It was something softer, something warm. It rose and fell quietly, barely audible, but the people closest to him heard it, and their eyes went wide, because in 11 years of serving under Dorian Ashvale, not one of them had ever heard that sound from him. His wolf purred. Maya did not understand what that meant. She only understood that she was still standing, and the guards had not moved, and the Alpha King was looking at her like she was something that did not fit into any category he had prepared for. He said, quietly, so that only the people nearest him could hear, "Do not apologize." Maya closed her mouth. She had been about to apologize. The word had been right there, ready to fall out of her. But something in his voice stopped her, not because it was commanding, though it was that too, but because he said it like he meant it. Like her apology would somehow cost more than the slap. Then he turned back to the room, and the music started again, and the world exhaled. Maya stood in the middle of the floor with her heart beating so loud she was certain everyone could hear it. A hand touched her shoulder. She turned to find an older woman in staff uniform, another coordinator, who looked at her with an expression that mixed relief and terror in equal parts. Come with me, the woman whispered. Maya followed her into the back corridor, and as soon as the door closed behind them, the woman turned around with wide eyes and said, "Do you know who that was?" "The Alpha King," Maya said. "Yes." "I slapped him." "Yes." "In front of everyone." "Yes." Maya sat down on a crate and put her face in her hands. She stayed in the back corridor for 20 minutes, convinced that each passing moment was simply the calm before she was dragged away. But the dragging never came. Instead, a tall man in a dark suit appeared at the corridor door. He had the build of someone who had never lost a fight, and the calm expression of someone who had won too many to count. "The Alpha King requests your presence at the high table," he said. Maya looked up. "I'm Staff. I'm aware. I broke his goblets. Also aware." She stood, straightened her jacket, and followed him. The high table was on a raised platform at the far end of the hall. When Maya arrived, the murmuring in the room changed in quality. It did not get louder. It got quieter, the way a crowd goes quiet when something happens that they know they will be talking about for years. Dorian Ashvale was seated at the center of the table. He did not look at her immediately. He was speaking to someone beside him, and he finished that sentence before he turned, which somehow made the moment feel more deliberate and less like an accident. He gestured to the empty seat to his left. Maya sat down. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then he asked her name. She told him. He asked what she did. She explained her work at the event company. He listened in the way that powerful people rarely listen, without looking around the room, without waiting for her to finish so he could speak. He just listened. The people near them watched carefully. His beta, a man named Cass who had served beside Dorian for more than a decade, sat 3 seats away and watched his alpha with an expression that started as confusion and ended as something close to disbelief. He had seen Dorian negotiate peace treaties without blinking. He had seen him face down challenges from alphas twice his age without showing a single crack. He had never, in 11 years, seen Dorian lean slightly forward when someone spoke. He had never seen that small, barely visible easing in Dorian's shoulders. After the gala ended and the guests began to leave, Cass found Dorian near the window of the east corridor and said, without preamble, "She is your mate." Dorian looked at him for a long moment. "No," he said. "Your wolf." "No," he said again. He walked away, but he did not give the order to let Maya leave. Maya discovered this when she tried to find her jacket and her car keys, and was quietly, politely, very firmly redirected to a guest room on the 2nd floor of the estate. Not a cell, not a locked room, a proper guest room, with a window and a bed and a small lamp on the nightstand, which was almost more frightening than a cell would have been, because she could not figure out what it meant. She sat on the edge of the bed and tried to think clearly. By morning, she had pieced together enough from the overheard conversations outside her door to understand that the world outside that room was not calm. Word had already spread through the pack network. A half-blood girl had struck the Alpha King and was alive and sitting in his guest room. The Elder Council was furious. A rival alpha named Rendell had arrived at the estate personally, which was either a political visit or a challenge depending on who you asked. She heard his voice through the wall of the corridor. He was not subtle about his opinions. She heard the words disgrace and weakness and tradition. She sat very still on the edge of the bed and understood that her continued breathing was, at this moment, a political problem. She decided she needed to leave. She stood. She crossed to the door and turned the handle and found, with a shock that stopped her completely, that it was unlocked. She stepped into the corridor. She took 3 steps and walked directly into Dorian Ashvale. They both stopped. He was not in his formal clothes now. He wore dark, simple clothes, the kind that made him look less like a king and more like a person, which was somehow worse because it made him harder to be afraid of and easier to look at. He was looking down at her with those silver eyes, and she was looking up at him, and neither of them moved. Then, because the corridor was narrow, and she stepped back, and he stepped forward to let her pass, their hands brushed. It was brief. It was nothing. It was the kind of accidental contact that happens 100 times a day between strangers. But it was not nothing. Maya felt something move through her chest like a wave. warm and deep and pulling, like standing in water that moves toward shore. It was not frightening. That was the strange part. Every reasonable part of her knew she should be frightened. She was in the home of the most powerful wolf alive. Her future was uncertain, and the entire pack structure was upset because of a moment involving her palm and his face. And yet, standing that close to him, she felt something she had not felt in as long as she could remember. She felt like she was in the right place. She pulled her hand back quickly. She looked at the floor. "I am sorry," she said. "I slapped you." He was quiet for a moment. "I told you not to apologize," he said. "I know," she said, "but I needed to say it anyway." She heard something then. Not a sound exactly, more like the absence of the tension she had been bracing for. She looked up and found him watching her with that same expression from the ballroom, like she was something he had not prepared a category for. "Go back to your room," he said. "The council meets this afternoon. After that, things will be clearer." She went back. The council meeting was held in the great chamber on the ground floor. Maya could not see it, but Cass told her about it later, quietly, standing in the hallway outside her door with his arms crossed, and a look on his face that suggested he was still processing what he had witnessed. Dorian had walked in. Every elder, every rival representative, every political voice demanding consequence had been waiting. Rendell had stood up immediately. The arguments came fast and loud. Dorian let them speak. He waited until the room ran out of words. Then he said that under the blood moon, the oldest and most sacred night in pack tradition, his wolf had recognized a mate bond. That the bond was not chosen or manufactured. That it was the oldest law in their world. Older than the council, older than titles, older than every political agreement in that room. That he would not act against the person the bond had chosen, and anyone who wished to challenge that was, by definition, challenging the foundation on which all their authority rested. The room did not go quiet this time. It erupted. 2 pack leaders left. Rendell called it theater. 3 elders spoke at once. Dorian stood at the head of the table and did not move, and did not raise his voice, and did not look away from any of them. He let the storm happen around him, and waited for it to exhaust itself, and when it did, he simply said, "We are finished here." Left. Cass finished telling her this, and then looked at her with an expression that was partly wonder, and partly the look of a man recalculating everything he thought he knew. "In 11 years, he said, I have never seen him move for anyone." Maya sat with that for a long time after Cass left. She thought about her life before that night, the small apartment, the jobs that kept her busy and small and out of the way, the years of learning not to want too much, because wanting things was a kind of visibility she had trained herself out of. She thought about being half of 2 worlds and fully part of neither. She thought about a wolf purring instead of roaring. She was still thinking about it when the door opened and Dorian stood in the frame. He had come himself. No guard ahead of him. No message sent first. He was simply there, standing in the doorway of the room, where she had spent a night trying to figure out what her life was about to become. He looked tired, not weak, just tired in the way that a person looks when they have been carrying something heavy for a long time and have not told anyone. He said, "I do not expect anything from you. I want to be clear about that. Whatever this is, whatever the bond means, it is not something I will use to take a choice away from you." Maya looked at him. "You just turned your entire council upside down," she said. "Yes, for someone you met yesterday. Yes, because your wolf purred." Something moved across his face. It was not quite a smile. It was the shape a smile would take if it were very new and still unsure of itself. "Because my wolf recognized something true," he said. "I am still deciding what to do with that, but I will not pretend it did not happen." Maya looked at this man who held kingdoms together with silence and silver eyes, and had just told a room full of powerful people that none of them mattered more than one moment of unexpected warmth in his chest. She thought about the slap, the accident, the way the world had gone still. She laughed. It came out small and a little shaky, but it was real. And Dorian Ashvale, for the first time in longer than anyone who knew him could remember, almost smiled back. She had not meant to walk into that ballroom and change anything. She had only meant to carry the tray and get through the night, and go home to her small, invisible life. But fate had never once asked her permission for anything, and it did not start that night either. It simply arrived, wearing silver eyes and a mark on its cheek that she had put there by accident, and it waited for her to decide what she would do next.